Shattered canvas. Prisha Kapoor's fingers flew across her drafting tablet, making final adjustments to the sustainable apartment complex that had consumed her thoughts for months. The Mumbai skyline glittered beyond her office window as evening descended, the city lights beginning their nightly dance against the darkening sky. Still perfecting the impossible, Vikram Mathur leaned against her doorframe, his tailored suit slightly rumpled after a day of corporate negotiations. His smile, the same one that had captivated her 3 years ago at a mutual friend's gallery, opening still made her stomach flutter. The Greenway project isn't impossible. It's just ... Prisha rotated the 3D model on her screen, revealing a cascading series of terraced gardens integrated into the building's facade. Ambitious. Like everything you do. Vikram crossed the room, pressing a kiss to her temple, including saying yes to marrying me. Prisha laughed, her engagement ring catching the light as she saved her work. At 32, her life had aligned into a pattern of satisfying precision, partner at Horizon Designs, engaged to a successful investment banker, and finally earning the industry recognition she'd worked toward since architecture school. Dinner at Vistara, made reservations. For 8, Vikram checked his watch. We're celebrating tonight. The Singapore merger went through? That's wonderful. Prisha shut down her computer and gathered her things. Give me 10 minutes to finish an email to the contractor. The office had emptied by the time Prisha sent her final message.
And had
begun to fall, transforming the streets below into shimmering ribbons. She texted Vikram that she was on her way, pulled on her raincoat, and hurried to the parking garage. Traffic moved sluggishly through the downpour. Prisha tapped her steering wheel impatiently, thinking about the wedding venue they were visiting on Saturday. 6 months until she became Mrs. Mathur. Her mother had already begun ordering custom decorations from Jaipur. Her phone chimed with a message from Vikram. Table waiting. Champagne getting warm. Where's my beautiful architect? Prisha smiled and was about to use voice command to reply when headlights suddenly flared in her rearview mirror. Too bright, too fast, too close. She barely had time to register what was happening before impact. Her car lurched forward violently, then spun. A second impact metal against concrete. Airbags exploded around her. Pain shot through her body as the world tilted and tumbled, then nothing. The persistent beeping penetrated the darkness first, and voices distant and muffled. Pain radiated from everywhere at once, a crushing, overwhelming presence. Prisha, can you hear me? She tried to open her eyes. The effort was monumental. Fluorescent lights stabbed her vision when she finally succeeded. You're at Lilavati Hospital. You've been in an accident. The doctor's face gradually came into focus. I'm Dr. Sharma. You've been unconscious for almost 2 days. Vikram. Her voice emerged as a whisper. Your fiancé's outside. He's been here since you arrived. Later, she would remember this moment in fragments. Vikram's face, pale and shocked when he entered, his hands trembling as they hovered above. Hers, afraid to touch. The doctor's careful explanation of her injuries, concussion, broken ribs, and most significantly, a fracture to her L1 vertebra. The good news is that the spinal cord itself wasn't severed, Dr. Sharma explained. But you'll need surgery, followed by extensive rehabilitation. Recovery will take months, possibly a year. But I'll walk again? Prisha asked, the question burning through the fog of painkillers. With proper treatment and therapy, yes. It will be a long road. Vikram squeezed her hand then, his grip firm as if to anchor her. We'll get through this together, he promised, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. Whatever it takes. Prisha believed him. Why wouldn't she? Their life had been meticulously planned. The wedding, the honeymoon in Bali, the eventual move to a house in Juhu. This was just a detour, a temporary setback in their carefully crafted future. She didn't yet understand that some fractures run deeper than bone, that some promises crack under pressure, and that sometimes life's most devastating collapses create space for unexpected foundations. The weight of absence, the rehabilitation center in Pune, was nothing like the sleek, modern buildings Prisha had designed. Nestled against the foothills, Sunrise Recovery Center's architecture was practical rather than aesthetic wide hallways. to accommodate wheelchairs, reinforced handrails along every wall, and windows positioned to maximize natural light. 6 weeks after her accident, Prisha had settled into a numbing routine. Mornings began with medication, followed by painful physical therapy sessions. Then afternoons of rest or occupational therapy, where she relearned basic tasks that had once been automatic. Her body, once her reliable instrument for bringing architectural visions to life, had become an unpredictable stranger. "You're improving faster than expected," her primary doctor noted during morning rounds. "The surgery was successful, and your upper body strength is returning nicely." What the doctor didn't mention, what no one mentioned, was how Vikram's visits had dwindled from daily to weekly. His calls from nightly to sporadic. Today marked 10 days since his last visit, though he had called twice and sent flowers once. "He's managing both our jobs," Prisha explained to her roommate Divya, a former dancer recovering from a motorcycle accident. "The Greenway project deadline is approaching, and he's coordinating with my team while handling his own clients." Divya, who had been at Sunrise long enough to witness many relationships tested by prolonged illness, merely nodded. "Of course. That makes sense." That evening, Prisha's physical therapist had canceled her session, leaving an unexpected gap in her schedule. She wheeled herself to the center's garden, phone in hand, determined to bridge the growing distance between herself and Vikram. He answered on the fourth ring, ambient noise suggesting he was at a restaurant or bar. "Prisha, everything okay? Everything's fine?" "I just missed you," adjusted her position, wincing at the twinge in her back. "The doctor says I'm making good progress." "That's fantastic. I knew you would." His enthusiasm sounded genuine, but slightly distant, as if he were watching her recovery from a neighboring country rather than a neighboring city. I was thinking maybe you could visit this weekend.
But
We could have dinner in the garden here. It's actually quite nice when this weekend," Vikram interrupted. I'm not sure I can make it. There's a client presentation on Saturday, and Sunday I promised my parents I'd attend this charity thing. The excuses continued, reasonable individually, but damning collectively. When had their relationship shifted from we to I, from shared plans to parallel lives? "I understand," Prisha said finally, though she did, later that night. She sketched architectural details in her therapy journals, something her occupational therapist had suggested to maintain fine motor skills. Her pencil traced the outline of the home she and Vikram had planned to build together, adding shadow and dimension until the drawing seemed more substantial than the reality it represented. 3 days later, Vikram arrived unannounced. Prisha was returning from a therapy session, exhausted and sweaty, when she spotted him in the visitors' lounge. Her heart leaped, then faltered at his expression, resolved in a way she recognized from his business negotiations. "I thought we should talk in person," he began after an awkward greeting. They moved to a private corner of the garden, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the path. Prisha waited, suddenly aware of the gulf between the woman she had been confident, accomplished, whole and the woman who now sat before him, dependent on a wheelchair and the skills of others. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," Vikram said, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains rather than her face. "About us, about the future." The familiar corporate cadence of his speech sent ice through her veins. This was Vikram in severance mode, not partnership mode. "Doctors say your recovery could take a year, maybe longer. Even then, ... double quotes. He trailed off, finally meeting her eyes. "I'm not sure I can do this, Prisha. I thought I could, but I'm not ... I'm not the person you need right now." The words hung between them, irrevocable. "You're leaving me." It wasn't a question. I'm being realistic. We're different people than we were when we got engaged. Our plans, our future, everything's changed. "Not everything," Prisha said quietly. "Not the part where we promised to support each other." Vikram had the decency to look ashamed, but not enough to reconsider. "You'll be better off with someone stronger than me, someone who can be what you need during all this." He returned the engagement ring before he left, a final business transaction, cleanly executed. Prisha sat in the garden long after he'd gone, watching darkness claim the landscape. feeling a different kind of paralysis creep through her chest. That night, he dreamed of buildings collapsing, of support beams buckling under unexpected pressure. She woke to find her face wet with tears and a curious emptiness where grief should be. Something had broken inside her that couldn't be fixed with surgery or physical therapy. It's a foundational crack in her understanding of love and commitment. The next morning, the primary therapist's unexpected absence was announced. Dr. Gupta has a family emergency, the nurse explained. The center director has assigned another specialist to take over your case. Prisha nodded absently, still wrapped in the cocoon of Vikram's departure. What did it matter who guided her broken body through exercises when her future lay in ruins around her? We'll be here this afternoon to introduce himself and review your progress, the nurse continued, making notes in Prisha's chart. Dr. Kana is one of our most experienced rehabilitation specialists. You're in excellent hands. The name barely registered as Prisha stared out the window, watching a pair of birds build a nest in the garden's oldest tree, piece by piece, twig by twig. They constructed something new from scattered fragments, oblivious to her envy as she wondered if she would ever build anything meaningful again. Familiar stranger. Arjun Khanna arrived precisely at 2 o'clock, a file tucked under his arm and reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed notes while walking. He nearly collided with Prisha's wheelchair in the hallway outside the therapy room. Sorry I wasn't. He looked up, the apology dying on his lips as recognition dawned. Prisha Kapoor? Prisha stared at the man before her, memories cascading through her mind like dominoes. Arjun Khanna, her nemesis throughout. Undergraduate studies at the National Institute of Design, the only student who had consistently challenged her for top marks, the arrogant boy who had once publicly criticized her final project, calling her sustainable design concepts aesthetically pleasing but functionally naive. Your Dr. Khanna? She asked, disbelief coloring her voice. A smile spread across his face, the same irritatingly confident smile she remembered from university, though now framed by a closely trimmed beard and more mature features. The one and only? Though I admit I didn't expect to find Prisha Kapoor on my patient roster. That makes 2 of us, she muttered. Arjun's eyes traveled from her face to the wheelchair, a brief flash of something surprise, compassion, crossing his expression before his professional demeanor returned. Let's continue this reunion inside, shall we? He gestured toward the therapy room. Inside, Arjun reviewed her file methodically, while Prisha studied him. He had filled out since university, his lanky frame now solid and assured. The boyish overconfidence had matured into something more quiet authority that even she had to acknowledge. L1 fracture with moderate displacement, he murmured, flipping through her scans. Surgery went well. Dr. Gupta's notes indicate good progress with upper body strengthening, but persistent challenges with lower limb mobility. He looked up. How would you assess your own progress? The question caught her off guard. Most medical professionals talked about her rather than to her. Slower than I'd like, she admitted. I can transfer from bed to chair independently now, but standing exercises are still ... double quotes. She hesitated. Difficult. Majun nodded, setting aside the file. Medical facts tell one story. Patient experience tells another. Both matter. He moved to the therapy mat. Show me where you are right now. No pushing beyond comfort today. This is just an assessment. For the next hour, Arjun observed her current capabilities with focused attention, occasionally making notes but mostly watching silently. His clinical gaze was different from the competitive looks they had exchanged in university hallways, but no less intense. Your upper body adaptation is impressive, he said finally. You've been supplementing the prescribed exercises, haven't you? Prisha felt a flicker of the old competitive spirit. I do additional sets in the evening. Architectural drafting requires significant upper body strength and precision. I need to get that back. Horizon Design's right, Arjun asked. I saw your coastal conservation center in a journal last year. The cantilevered observation decks were brilliant. The compliment, so unexpected from her former rival, momentarily silenced her. You've been following my work? Shadow of embarrassment crossed his face. I keep up with major architectural innovations. particularly in sustainable design. He cleared his throat. Your case presents some interesting challenges. L1 vertebra affects the transition between thoracic and lumbar regions, which impacts core stability, essential for the posture your profession demands. He outlined a modified therapy plan, more aggressive than Dr. Gupta's, but tailored specifically to the demands of her career. Throughout his explanation, Prisha found herself nodding along, impressed despite her lingering wariness. We'll start tomorrow, he concluded. 6 sessions weekly, with progressive intensity. Recovery isn't linear, Prisha. There will be setbacks, but with consistent work, he hesitated, then added quietly, you'll design buildings again? Those 5 words addressing her deepest fear, without her having voiced it, broke through her carefully constructed walls. Tears welled unexpectedly, and she turned away, hating the vulnerability. Sorry, she whispered, furious at herself for breaking down in front of Arjun Khanna of all people. Don't apologize for genuine emotion, he said, his voice gentler than she'd ever heard it. Besides, I've seen you cry before. Remember the structural engineering final when Professor Sharma? When he praised your model and criticized mine for prioritizing form over function? Prisha finished, surprised she could smile at the memory. I didn't cry. I was having an allergic reaction to the adhesive. Of course you were. Arjun's eyes crinkled with amusement. It's just like I had dust in my eye when you won the national competition in our final year. A nurse appeared at the doorway. Dr. Khanna, your next patient is ready. June nodded, gathering his notes. Tomorrow at 9, Prisha. Wear comfortable clothes and prepare to work harder than you did competing with me for class rank. After he left, Prisha sat quietly, processing the unexpected reappearance of Arjun Khanna in her life. Of all the rehabilitation specialists in Maharashtra, she had to get the one person who had witnessed both her triumphs and failures, who knew her before her body betrayed her, who had always pushed her to her limits, and sometimes beyond. Yet, something in his confidence had reached the part of her that had begun to doubt, reigniting a familiar spark of determination. If Arjun believed she would design again, perhaps she could begin to believe it too. Building foundations by the 3rd week under Arjun's care, Prisha had developed a grudging respect for his methods. Unlike Dr. Gupta's cautious approach, Arjun pushed her consistently to the edge of her capabilities, never beyond safety, but far enough that each session left her simultaneously exhausted and accomplished. Your body responds well to challenge, he observed one morning, as she completed a series of core stabilization exercises. Always has, from what I remember. What's that supposed to mean? Prisha asked, using a towel to wipe perspiration from her forehead. Just that you've never backed down from a challenge. Remember that sustainable housing competition? Everyone else designed for moderate climates? You chose the most extreme desert conditions specifically because it was harder. Prisha transferred herself from the therapy mat back to her chair with practiced movements. I'm surprised you remember such details about a rival's work. Arjun adjusted the resistance settings on the equipment for her next exercise. We weren't rivals, Prisha. We were peers who pushed each other to excellence. Is that what you call publicly criticizing my final project? A flash of regret crossed his face. It's not my finest moment. The arrogance of youth, he met her eyes directly. I owe you an apology for that. Your concepts were innovative ahead of their time, actually. I was intimidated and responded poorly. The admission startled her. The Arjun she remembered would never have acknowledged such a thing. Their sessions fell into a rhythm-intense work punctuated by unexpected conversations that gradually revealed the paths their lives had taken since university. Arjun had pursued medicine after a car accident claimed his younger brother, specializing in rehabilitation to help others reclaim their lives after trauma. Prisha shared stories of her architectural triumphs and challenges, carefully avoiding any mention of Vikram. But one rainy afternoon, as thunder rolled across the hills surrounding the center, the subject became unavoidable. Your fiancé hasn't visited recently, Arjun observed as he helped position her for a new standing exercise. Though framed as a casual comment, Prisha detected the question beneath it. Her hands tightened on the parallel bars. Ex-fiancé, she corrected, focusing on her positioning rather than Arjun's face. He decided a disabled architect wasn't part of his 5-year plan. Arjun's hand stilled momentarily on the supportive belt around her waist. His loss, he said simply, before returning to professional mode. Now shift your weight forward slightly while maintaining core engagement. Later, after she had successfully stood independently for nearly 2 minutes, a new recorder Jin wheeled her back to her room in silence. At her door, he paused. Some people build relationships like developers build commercial properties quickly. Cheap materials designed to look good rather than endure, he said. Others build like master architects with careful planning, quality foundations, and the understanding that true strength emerges through weathering storms. Before she could respond, he continued, "My last appointment canceled. I'm heading to the cafe across the street for coffee. Their samosas are surprisingly good. Would you like to join me? As colleagues?" he added hastily. "Or friends, perhaps?" Invitation hung between them, casual, yet somehow significant. "I could use a change of scenery," Prisha agreed, surprised by her own response. The cafe was small but accessible, the covered patio where they settled as rain continued to fall. Softly around them, away from the clinical setting of the rehabilitation center, their conversation flowed more naturally. Touching on mutual acquaintances from university, favorite buildings around the world, and the challenges of their respective professions. "Why? Did you really switch from architecture to medicine?" Prisha asked after their food arrived. Couldn't have been an easy transition. Arjun's expression sobered. "After Vikram, my brother, not your ex, died, I spent months angry at the medical system that couldn't save him. Then I realized anger without action is just wasted energy. I was 24, starting over completely, but it felt necessary." He looked at her thoughtfully. "Sometimes the structure we thought we were building collapses, and we're forced to create something entirely different from the ruins." The parallel to her own situation wasn't subtle, but it resonated deeply. "I haven't drawn anything since the accident," she admitted.
How many?
"Not a single building or design. I keep telling myself it's because of physical limitations, but honestly, I'm afraid I've lost more than mobility. What if I've lost my creative vision?" Too, Arjun considered this. The brain needs stimulation to maintain neural pathways. Instead of waiting until you're ready, why not start with small exercises now? Adaptation is what humans do best. The next day, he arrived at their session with a drawing board modified to attach to her wheelchair and a set of professional drafting tools. 10 minutes of architectural exercises after each physical therapy session, he prescribed with mock seriousness, doctor's orders. Gradually, Prisha began reclaiming pieces of herself, not just physical capabilities, but the essence of who she was beyond her injury. Simple sketches evolved into detailed drawings. Tentative steps with support became stronger, more confident movements. And somewhere between therapy sessions and late evening conversations in the center's garden, between shared frustrations and unexpected laughter, the boundaries between patient and doctor, former rivals and new allies, began to blur into something neither had anticipated. It was Divya who pointed out the obvious one evening after Arjun had wheeled Prisha back from a therapy session, both of them still laughing about some shared joke. "That man looks at you the way people look at sunrise after a long night," her roommate observed, "and you're not exactly indifferent either." "He's my doctor," Prisha protested. "For now," Divya replied with knowing smile. "But healing doesn't last forever, while some connections do." That night, Prisha dreamed not of collapsing buildings, but of new structures rising from cleared ground, different from what had stood before but beautiful in their own right. Redesigned blueprint for months after her first session with Arjun, Prisha stood unassisted at the center's rooftop garden, watching sunrise paint the distant hills in gold and amber. Her progress had exceeded everyone's expectations, including her own. Though she still used a wheelchair for longer distances and would require a cane for at least another year, her spine had healed remarkably well. Today marked her final week at Sunrise Recovery Center. Her apartment in Mumbai had been modified for accessibility, and Horizon Designs had eagerly awaited her return, her temporary replacement having proven that Prisha's creative vision was indeed irreplaceable. "I thought I'd find you here." Arjun's voice came from behind her. "You never miss a sunrise anymore." Prisha turned carefully, balancing with practiced skill. They remind me that new beginnings happen every day, whether we're ready for them or not. He joined her at the railing, close enough that she could feel his warmth in the morning chill. These past months had transformed their relationship into something neither could have predicted: a connection built on shared history, mutual respect, and gradual understanding that transcended their professional dynamics. "I reviewed your final assessment yesterday," he said. "Medically speaking, you no longer need my services as a rehabilitation specialist." The statement held more weight than its clinical meaning suggested. Throughout her recovery, they had maintained professional boundaries during therapy hours, while allowing their personal connection to develop during off-hours conversations and occasional outings beyond the center's walls. "So you're firing me as a patient?" Prisha asked, attempting lightness despite the sudden tightness in her chest. "I am." Arjun turned to face her fully. "Which means I'm finally free to ask you something I've wanted to ask for weeks." Her pulse quickened. "And what's that?" "Have dinner with me in Mumbai next weekend. Not as your doctor, not as your former rival, just as a man who has spent 4 months falling in." He paused, recalibrating. "A man who would very much like to see where this could go without medical ethics getting in the way." Prisha studied his face, the features that had once represented competition now familiar in an entirely different context. "You do realize I'm still recovering? That my life is more complicated now than before?" "Complicated doesn't scare me," he replied. "Architectural marvels aren't built on perfectly flat, empty sites. The most interesting structures work with challenging terrain, incorporating obstacles into their design rather than fighting against them." She smiled at the metaphor. "Are you calling me a challenging terrain, Dr. Khanna?" "I'm calling you exactly what you are: a masterpiece in progress." His expression grew serious. "I know Mumbai and Pune aren't exactly neighbors. I know you have rebuilding to do professionally and personally. I'm not asking for promises, just ... possibility." 3 days later, Prisha sat in her therapy room for the final evaluation, her discharge papers waiting for signature. On the table, beside her, lay a portfolio containing drawings she had created during her recovery, a series of designs for accessible, public spaces that incorporated her newfound understanding of how environments could either empower or disable. "These are extraordinary," Arjun said, examining the detailed renderings. "You're not just returning to your career, you're expanding it into new territory." "I'm thinking of proposing a specialized division at Horizon," she explained. "Adaptive architecture for rehabilitation and accessibility. My experience here has shown me how poorly designed most spaces are for people with different mobility needs." He looked up from the drawings, pride evident in his expression. "From trauma to transformation. It's the story of every patient I've worked with, but few embrace it as completely as you have." "I had exceptional guidance," Prisha acknowledged, "both professionally and personally." Later that afternoon, as her brother Nikhil loaded the last of her belongings into his car, Prisha took a final tour through the gardens where she had spent countless hours rebuilding her strength and reimagining her future. So much had changed in 6 months, not just her body, but her perspective, priorities, and possibilities. Arjun found her by the fountain, where they had shared many conversations during her recovery. "Ready for the next chapter?" he asked. "Almost." She turned to face him. "I never properly thanked you, not just for the physical therapy, but for seeing me as whole when I couldn't see it myself." "You did the same for me," he replied, reminding me why I chose this path. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken potential. Then Prisha reached for his hand, her grasp firm and certain. "About dinner next weekend," she said. "I know a place with excellent food and a roof garden that rivals this one. The architect who designed it was particularly proud of making it accessible to everyone." Arjun's smile widened with understanding. "Sounds perfect. I'd love to meet this architect someday." "You will," Prisha promised. She's still recovering. In some ways, still discovering new aspects of herself. But she's stronger than she ever imagined possible. As they walked together toward the center's entrance, Prisha, with her carefully measured steps, Arjun matching his pace to hers, she reflected on the strange architecture of fate. How catastrophe could clear space for creation. How the collapse of one dream could reveal the foundation for another. How sometimes the people we least expect become the ones who help us rebuild when everything falls apart. The structures of her life had been fundamentally redesigned, not according to the blueprint she had originally drafted, but perhaps into something more resilient, more authentic, and ultimately more beautiful than she had initially imagined. And for the first time since the accident, that thought filled her not with grief for what was lost, but with anticipation for what might yet be built.